Below is Section 1. When you're ready, type continue for Section 2. Section 1. The moment the toy tank appears. অক্টোবরের 6 1941. Dawn. The forests east of Midzensk. Frost clings to the pine needles. Engine breath hangs in the air like smoke from sleeping beasts. German Panzer E Commander Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Thompson wipes condensation from his periscope and frowns into the half-light. Something out there is moving. Slow, heavy, unfamiliar. His radio crackles, static, then a voice. Find Panzer, unidentified, advancing through the tree line. Thompson leans forward. Unidentified, he mutters. By October, Barbarossa has turned into a parade of shattered Soviet armor. Burned out BT-70s, crippled T-26s, machines the Germans had sliced apart all summer. What could possibly still surprise them? Then he hears it. Not the usual shrill, rattling whine of Soviet light tanks. This sound is deeper, thicker, like a rolling thunder that doesn't echo, it absorbs. A shape emerges between the trunks. At first glance it looks wrong. Too angular, too bulky. Its armor shimmers with morning frost, sloped like a knife, its edge. Thompson squints. The hull seems to shrug off the forest as it pushes through, branches snapping against the glacis. A tank commander beside him whispers, "What in God's name is that?" The Germans had seen captured photos of strange Soviet prototypes months earlier, and dismissed them. Reports described crude welding, mismatched parts, armor plates hammered together in factories running on desperation. Intelligence officers scoffed. They'll fall apart before they reach the front, one colonel had boasted. But this machine looks anything but fragile. Its white tracks churn the mud as if it were dry road. Its turret turns with a low, deliberate growl. And then Thompson sees the gun, 76.2 mm, thick, predatory, pointed directly at the German line. He feels something he hasn't felt since France. A quiet, creeping doubt. The first shot erupts, an echoing crack that shakes needles from the branches above. A Panzer E 50 meters ahead takes the hit. Armor peels open like paper. Flames burst from the hatches as its crew scrambles out. Impossible, Thompson breathes. The German platoon returns fire, solid AP shells striking the newcomers' sloped armor at perfect angles. But every impact ricochets upward, whining into the sky. Ping, ping, ping. The shells might as well be thrown pebbles. One gunner shouts through clenched teeth, "It's bouncing everything." Another curses, "It shouldn't be able to move like that." The Soviet tank presses forward, unhurried, almost indifferent. As it reaches open ground, more shapes begin to appear behind it, a line of them, emerging from the trees like iron ghosts. Thompson's throat goes dry. These aren't prototypes. These aren't accidents. This is something the Germans did not plan for. In a command car miles behind the front, General Heinz Guderian is poring over maps when he hears the first frantic reports from the Midzensk sector. Words like, new model, heavy armor, and Panzer losses unacceptable, flare through the radio net. He pauses mid-sentence. Another message, enemy tank invulnerable to 50 mm shells. Repeat, invulnerable. The pencil slips from Guderian's hand. Back near Midzensk, Thompson slams his turret hatch shut as another Soviet round streaks past. He grabs the intercom throat mic. All units, reverse. Reverse now. But as his driver throws the Panzer into retreat, Thompson keeps his eyes locked on the advancing silhouette. It should not exist. It should not be here. And yet, it is coming straight for them. And this is only the first one. The forest behind it is full of engines coming alive. Something new has entered the OR. Something the Germans never believed the Soviets could build. And as Thompson watches the T-26s spread out like wolves forming a kill circle, he knows the truth.
Section 2. The shock breaks across the front. The retreat is chaos. Thompson's driver grinds the gears as the Panzer III lurches backward down a narrow forest track, branches whipping against the hull. Over the intercom, every voice is shouting at once, range estimates, armor warnings, desperate questions no one can answer. Then the radio net erupts with a single word, repeated again and again. T-34, T-34, T-34. The name spreads faster than the tanks themselves. German crews who moments earlier were confident, almost bored, now look at each other with an expression Thompson hasn't seen since the Ardennes, fear mixed with disbelief. A corporal in the loader's seat mutters, "Where did they hide these? How many do they have?" No one answers. Outside, the battlefield lights up. T-34s break through the tree line, their wide tracks gripping the mud like claws. They move fast, faster than a medium tank has any right to. Their diesel engines roar through the smoke as they fan out across the German positions, firing on the move. A Panzer IV on the ridge swings its short-barreled 75mm gun toward the lead T-34. The gun fires, an ear-splitting blast that shakes the earth. The shell slams into the Soviet tank at a perfect angle. For a moment, Thompson dares to hope. Then the T-34 keeps coming. The round glances off its sloped armor, twisting into the fog. The Soviet gunner returns fire. The Panzer IV disappears in a flash of orange and black. A sickening realization spreads through the German lines. Their best tanks cannot kill this thing. Thompson opens his hatch for a moment, just enough to feel the cold air and catch a glimpse of the madness unfolding. Infantrymen scramble behind overturned carts. Anti-tank crews man their 37mm guns, door knockers, the troops call them, and fire hopelessly at the oncoming steel. Every round bounces off with the same metallic scream. Bing, scree, bing. A gunner cries out, "It's useless." They don't even notice. The Soviet tanks push forward, crushing the abandoned guns beneath their tracks. And then, through the smoke, Thompson sees them, supporting KV-1s, monstrous silhouettes moving behind the T-34s like armored giants. If the T-34 is fast doom, the KV-1 is slow inevitability. His heart sinks. This isn't a counterattack, he whispers. This is a wall. Miles to the rear, Guderian receives the next cluster of frantic reports. He listens in silence as each officer describes the same impossible picture. German shells ricocheting, formations collapsing, Soviet tanks moving with a confidence no one has seen before. Guderian turns to his staff. Is this confirmed? A colonel nods stiffly. Multiple divisions report identical encounters, Herr General. For the first time since the invasion began, Guderian feels the edges of a thought he has not allowed himself until now. We misjudged them. Not just their army, not just their numbers, but their industry. Behind him, telephone lines buzz with questions from Army High Command that no one can answer. How many T-34s are there? Where did they come from? Why were they never detected in large numbers? How long until they reach the next sector? But the reports keep coming. A battalion near Oral claims they saw dozens. Panzerjäger units say their guns might as well be shooting wood. A reconnaissance officer describes an entire German company wiped out by a single Soviet platoon. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense. And yet, the radio keeps repeating the same urgent code word. Neuer Typ, new type, new tank, new problem. Back near Mtsensk, Thompson's Panzer III breaks out of the forest onto a muddy farm track. Smoke hangs low over the fields. His driver slams the brakes as another tank bursts through a barn to their right, another T-34, mud cascading off its tracks like water. The two tanks face each other for a heartbeat. Thompson shouts, "Smoke, left side, move." They throw the vehicle into a cloud of white phosphorus and skitter away, narrowly avoiding the Soviet shot that obliterates the barn behind them. The Germans are no longer fighting. They're surviving, but as Thompson's tank races toward regrouping lines, he hears something that chills him more than any shellfire. More engines, more treads, dozens, and all moving in the same direction, right toward the heart of Guderian's advance. Section 3. Guderian's realization. Late afternoon, October 6, 1941. The sun hangs low over the Oka River basin, staining the horizon blood orange as the temperature drops. In a small forward command post, little more than a commandeered farmhouse with maps nailed to the walls, General Heinz Guderian stands frozen over a field telephone. Another report, another broken regiment, another battalion claiming their shells simply bounced. The line crackles with static, then a young officer's voice. "Sir, they're pushing through everywhere. Our 50mm guns can't." A boom interrupts him, followed by screams fading into static. The line goes dead. Guderian lowers the receiver. For a long moment he doesn't speak. His staff officers shift uncomfortably, waiting for instruction. Waiting for certainty. Waiting for the reassuring calm he always brought to Barbarossa's first triumphant months. But this time, he doesn't have it. He looks at the battlefield map. Red Soviet arrows, once small and scattered, are swelling, widening, pressing into vulnerable German flanks. And all along their spearheads, scribbled in rushed pencil notes, are the same three characters. T-34. He turns to Oberst Rudolf Hofbauer, his intelligence chief. You told me their armor was obsolete, Guderian says flatly. Hofbauer stiffens. Based on every captured model, yes. Nothing like this existed insignificant. Guderian cuts him off. It exists on my front. He steps toward the window. Outside, trucks race past carrying wounded men. Their faces are gray with cold and shock. Some stare blankly, others mutter to themselves, replaying the day's impossible encounters. A medic trots beside one truck calling for help. Guderian notices one injured tank commander gripping his shattered periscope like a relic. They came out of the trees, the man whispers. Like they were bulletproof. Guderian turns away. Inside, a runner bursts into the room with a battered ammunition crate in his hands. From the 4th Panzer Division, sir, he says breathlessly. Recovered from the battlefield. He opens it. Inside lies a chunk of thick, blackened steel, a piece of sloped armor, ripped from a Soviet hull. The Germans have been trying to analyze it all afternoon. Heat-treated, angled, dense. One officer taps it with a knife. The blade skitters off harmlessly. Guderian's eyes narrow. This is not the work of amateurs, he mutters. This is deliberate, engineered, prepared. Another officer adds quietly, it's beyond anything we've designed for our mediums. The room falls silent. Suddenly the earth trembles. Distant engines. At first the Germans think it might be reinforcements, but the vibration grows deeper, heavier, more rhythmic. Thompson's retreating panzer column bursts into view across the fields, battered and coated in black soot. Some tanks are trailing smoke. Others are missing side skirts. A few limp forward on damaged tracks, barely clinging to motion. Behind them, carried by the same tremors, comes something else. The sound of Soviet armor advancing. Guderian steps outside. Officers follow him. Through the haze of smoke and twilight, faint silhouettes begin to appear on the horizon. Dozens of T-34s, their angular turrets cutting clean shapes in the evening glow. The Germans cannot see details, but they can see confidence in the Soviet line formation. A boldness no one thought the Red Army capable of. A staff captain inhales sharply. They're not running. No, they aren't. Guderian watches as a young lieutenant, face smeared with burned oil, stumbles toward him. It's Thompson. He snaps to attention but can barely stand. Report, Guderian says. Thompson swallows hard. Sir, we hit them at 50 meters. Point blank. Nothing. Every round bounced. Our panzers, they're outclassed. He pauses, searching for words, then adds quietly. It's like fighting ghosts made of iron. The general studies him, then the battlefield behind him. For months, German crews have fought with the certainty that Soviet machines were backward, fragile, inferior. That confidence helped drive them hundreds of miles into enemy territory. But here, right here at Mtsensk, that illusion is dying. Guderian feels a weight settle in his chest. If the Soviets can build tanks like this, if they can field them in numbers, if this is only the beginning, then Germany has stumbled into a far longer war than anyone in Berlin imagined. His adjutant approaches cautiously. Sir, orders. Guderian inhales cold air, then steps back toward the map table. Prepare a defensive line, he says. His voice is steady now, but grim. Pull the 4th Panzer back behind the river. We regroup tonight. No more advances until we understand what we are facing. An officer hesitates. Is it really that serious, General? Guderian looks at him, not with anger, but with something deeper. A realization forming into certainty. It is, he says. We have underestimated the Soviets. Their industry, their engineers, their resolve. This T-34, his voice trails for a moment. It may be the most important tank in this war. Behind him, the low thunder of approaching engines grows louder, echoing across the darkening fields. And somewhere in that sound, steady, confident, unhurried, Guderian hears something that chills him more than any report. Section 4. The night the front held its breath. Night falls fast over Mtsensk. The last streaks of orange fade into a cold, metallic blue as fog begins creeping across the open fields. German engineers work by lantern light, shoveling earth into makeshift anti-tank ditches, hammering wooden stakes, and stringing detonator wires that tremble in their hands. No one speaks above a whisper. The men feel it, a pressure in the air, like the battlefield itself is inhaling and refusing to exhale. Thompson sits on the glacis of his Panzer III, helmet off, hair matted with ash. Every so often he glances toward the dark treeline where the T-34s disappeared hours earlier. He's never feared night attacks. German discipline thrived in darkness, but this night feels different. His loader, Feldwebel Kruger, breaks the silence. You think they'll come? Thompson doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. Far down the line, muffled reports drift through the fog. Soviet scouts prying at the edges of the German retreat, testing, measuring, probing for weakness. Occasionally a flare arcs into the sky, revealing burned-out hulks on both sides, jagged silhouettes frozen mid-death. Guderian arrives at the front an hour later, wrapped in a heavy greatcoat. The thermometer is sinking below freezing, turning the battlefield into a brittle crust that crunches under every bootstep. Officers crowd around a table hastily built from ammunition crates. A courier points at a marked section of the map. Sir, reconnaissance confirms they're massing armor here. T-34s and heavy KVs. They're preparing for a push at dawn. At dawn, the same dawn that helped reveal their nightmare earlier today. Guderian folds his arms. We hold, he says. No breakout, no collapse. If we run tonight, we never stop running. A grim murmur moves through the officers. Thompson is summoned to provide first-hand details. When he steps into the lantern-lit command post, Guderian studies him closely. You saw them up close, the general says. What did you learn? Thompson hesitates, choosing his words carefully. Sir, the T-34 is not a tank you outmaneuver. It outmaneuvers you. Our roads bog us down. Their tracks glide through anything. They pick the ground, the range, the fight. He breathes out slowly. It feels inevitable. The room is silent. Guderian turns back to the map. Then we don't fight them on their terms. We fight them on ours. He orders. Pre-registered artillery barrages on every likely approach. Motorized infantry spread in depth, not clustered. 88mm anti-aircraft guns repositioned as emergency anti-tank weapons. Panzer reserves shifted to cover the river crossing. His voice hardens. We make them pay for every meter. Outside, the fog thickens. A German sentry on the eastern perimeter leans into the mist, trying to see more than 5 meters ahead. He hears something, soft at first, then unmistakable. Engines. Multiple. Idling somewhere in the darkness. He grips his rifle tighter. A faint metallic clatter echoes, like a track link snapping into place. Then silence again, heavy enough to crush breath. He whispers into his field phone, they're out there. Thompson hears the same distant hum and feels his stomach tighten. He climbs back into his tank, his steel shelter, his coffin, his world, and pulls the hatch shut. Inside, the cramped space smells of cordite and cold oil. The crew waits in grim anticipation. You can almost feel the night listening, Kruger mutters. Then, without warning, a Soviet flare bursts overhead, white, blinding, cruel. The sky becomes day for 2 heartbeats. And in that sudden glare, the Germans finally see them. Dozens of angular shapes crouched at the treeline. T-34s, KV-1s, engines rumbling like distant thunder. Perfectly still, perfectly lined, perfectly ready. The flare burns out. Darkness crashes back. Thompson exhales shakily. How many are there? Guderian stands beside his staff car, staring at the invisible horizon where the Soviets wait. His breath rises in white puffs. He speaks softly, not to anyone in particular. This is the price of underestimating an enemy. Behind him, the German line braces for the inevitable storm. Somewhere out in the fog, a single Soviet engine revs slightly higher, just enough to make every man along the German front swallow hard. Section 5. Dawn of the T-34 Offensive. October 7, 1941. 5:30. Mtsensk front lines. The first pale light seeps through a clouded sky. Frost glints on the earth, turning churned mud into sharp crystal shards. A biting wind whistles through the trees, carrying the distant rumble of engines. The T-34s are moving. Thompson sits tensely in his Panzer III, eyes glued to the horizon. Every nerve screams. Something is coming, something unstoppable. Behind him, his crew fidgets with shells, checking gun elevation and loader mechanics one last time. Silence dominates, broken only by the occasional cough, the metal scrape of boots, the faint hum of engines growing louder. And then they appear. From the treeline, a line of T-34s emerges like a living wall of steel. Their angular turrets cut through the mist, their diesel engines growling a deep, unrelenting cadence. Behind them, KV-1s lumber forward, shadowed by thin gray smoke rising from distant artillery positions. It's not a haphazard advance, it's a coordinated, mechanical juggernaut. Thompson tries to hold his ground. He trains his 50mm gun on the nearest T-34 and fires. Ping. The shell ricochets harmlessly. Another round. Ping. A third. Ping. Each impact echoes in the crisp morning air like a taunt. The Soviet tanks fan out, exploiting every weak point in the German line. Panzer IVs are already retreating after failing to halt their advance. Infantrymen fire desperate shots from anti-tank rifles, their weapons sputtering uselessly against sloped armor. Thompson can see the panic spread, the discipline of the panzer crews is fraying. A shell from AT-34 obliterates a machine gun nest 50 meters away. The explosion sends splinters of wood and steel flying. Soldiers scream. Thompson's tank rocks as he maneuvers to avoid the blast. "Hold your fire," he shouts, but no one can hear him over the roar of engines and the screaming metal of ricocheting shells. Meanwhile, miles behind, Guderian watches through binoculars from a ridge. His jaw is tight, his knuckles white around the binocular grips. Reports flash across the radio: battalions scattered, regiments pinned, anti-tank crews overrun. Every signal confirms the same terrifying reality: the T-34 is redefining armored warfare on the Eastern Front. He thinks of the factories east of Moscow and Kharkiv, churning out more tanks than he ever imagined. The speed, the engineering, the sheer resilience, it all converges into this moment. A horrifying clarity grips him. Germany had assumed Soviet industry would collapse under the weight of blitzkrieg. Now, the proof is in the fields of Mtsensk. Thompson slams the hatch shut as AT-34 passes dangerously close, its turret sweeping left to target another panzer. His driver swerves. Mud sprays into the air. The frost-covered ground shakes with every passing tank. "Sir," the loader mutters, voice barely audible, there, unstoppable." Thompson swallows. "We adapt, or we die." In the fog, German artillery begins firing pre-registered barrages, but the T-34s weave between the explosions with uncanny timing. KV-1s crush obstacles in their path. Every German attempt to check their advance is countered with precision. And then, something unexpected: a flanking maneuver. A small unit of T-34s veers toward a lightly defended farm track. Thompson watches helplessly as they slice through the gap like knives through paper. Panzer crews in that sector are forced to retreat or be annihilated. The German line, already stretched thin, begins to buckle. Thompson's mind races. Retreat, regroup, counterattack. Each choice carries deadly consequences. For the first time in months, he doubts whether their advance into the Soviet Union can continue. From the ridge, Guderian whispers to himself, almost inaudibly, "We underestimated them, completely. This changes everything." And as the first rays of sunlight reflect off the T-34's sloped armor, glinting like a dagger pointed straight at the heart of the German army, Thompson knows one truth he cannot escape. Section 6. Survival and Desperation. By mid-morning, the German line has turned into a shattered cordon. Smoke rises from burned-out panzers, anti-tank positions lie in ruins, and the cries of injured men echo across the frozen fields. The T-34s advance steadily, their engines a low, relentless growl that seems to consume every ounce of morale along the front. Thompson's Panzer III jerks over the frozen mud. His loader, Kruger, checks the shells again. Every round feels like a lottery, worthless if it doesn't hit at the right angle. The tank rocks under small arms fire ricocheting off the glacis. Dust, frost, and the metallic tang of smoke fill the air. Outside, the infantry scrambles. Men fall into shallow ditches, trying to escape the pounding tracks. A squad leader yells orders that are already impossible to obey. Each T-34 that passes sends a shiver through the soldiers, because it survives, it moves, and it keeps coming. Thompson spots a gap in the Soviet formation. For a moment, he considers exploiting it to break free. But the T-34s react with almost preternatural coordination. One detaches, slides into the open, and the German squad's Panzer IV is crushed before it can fire a second shot. Another follows, cutting off Thompson's escape route. "Hold together," he shouts into the intercom, but even he knows it's empty encouragement. Panic has become a physical weight pressing down on the crew. From the ridge, Guderian watches through binoculars, noting every maneuver, every failed German attempt to halt the advance. He scribbles notes frantically. The scale of the T-34 threat is undeniable. Not just one tank, not just a few prototypes, but waves of them, backed by industrial production he had underestimated. Every thought in his mind twists into a single realization: if the Germans cannot contain this advance, the campaign could stall, or worse, collapse. Back at Mtsensk, a KV-1 lumbers through a destroyed bridge, crushing the remnants of a German supply convoy beneath its tracks. Thompson sees the metal tear and splinter, a visceral reminder that these machines are unstoppable under normal tactics. He grits his teeth and takes a deep breath. Survival now depends not on firepower, but on improvisation. Smoke grenades are deployed to obscure movement, engines rev at maximum to flee the inevitable line of fire, anti-tank teams fire from impossible angles. Every moment is a desperate gamble. Thompson's radio crackles with a single, urgent message. All units, fall back to the river line. Do not engage T-34s head-on. Relief and dread mix. Retreat is ordered, but retreat means exposing already vulnerable flanks. His stomach knots as he realizes this is the first real test of German armored doctrine against an enemy that refuses to fight the way they expect. As he maneuvers the tank toward the river line, a shadow passes overhead, a Soviet reconnaissance plane, buzzing low, observing, calculating. The hum of its engine is almost indistinguishable from the growl of the T-34s below. Every German crewman feels it. The enemy is everywhere, coordinated, efficient, and relentless. Thompson exhales, gripping the periscope tightly. Survival is the only option. And as the last T-34 in the immediate formation rumbles past, its turret sweeping left and right, he knows that the day will end in exhaustion, fear, and lessons written in steel. Somewhere in the distance, a German officer mutters under his breath. Did we really think we could crush them in a week? A month? We underestimated everything. Section 7. The turning point at Mtsensk. By late afternoon, the smoke over Mtsensk has thickened into a choking haze. Burned-out tanks litter the frozen fields like abandoned tombstones, and the cries of wounded soldiers echo across the devastated landscape. German units have pulled back to hastily prepared defensive lines along the Oka River, but even here, the T-34's presence is impossible to ignore. Thompson's Panzer III emerges from a narrow gully, mud caking the tracks. His eyes scan the horizon. The T-34s are advancing steadily, and their coordinated movements are no longer chaotic. They operate as a single machine, fanning out, exploiting weak points, testing defenses. Each tank seems almost alive, a predator learning from every encounter. Guderian arrives at the forward command post, his greatcoat flapping in the bitter wind. He studies the battlefield through binoculars. The reports have been consistent all morning. German panzers are failing to stop these tanks, artillery is largely ineffective, and infantry is pinned wherever T-34s appear. Every movement is a revelation. He turns to his staff. These aren't mistakes. This is engineering, preparation, and sheer industrial output. If we cannot adjust, we will bleed faster than we can replace. Back on the line, Thompson's crew spots a T-34 attempting to flank a Panzer IV hidden behind a ruined barn. The German tank fires multiple rounds, ping, 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 none of which penetrate. The T-34's tracks carve a path through mud and debris, and the Panzer IV is immobilized, its crew scrambling to survive. Thompson realizes this isn't just a tactical threat, it's a psychological one. The confidence these Soviet tanks project is contagious. German crews hesitate, second-guess, panic. Guderian watches as a small group of T-34s deliberately bypasses strongpoints, heading toward supply depots. He immediately understands the implication. The Soviets are targeting logistics, ammunition, fuel, the lifeblood of an advancing army. A single misstep here could slow the German advance for weeks. As the sun dips toward the horizon, Thompson and his crew find temporary cover behind a ruined farmhouse. Exhausted, they reload shells with trembling hands. Frost bites through their uniforms, their breath misting in the bitter air. Thompson reflects on the day. Every German doctrine he learned, every training exercise, every expected advantage, neutralized. A distant rumble grows. More T-34s appear, sweeping along the defensive line. Thompson grips the periscope. The realization hits him like ice. The front line will never be the same. Guderian, meanwhile, paces inside the command post, muttering to himself. The operational maps are filled with red marks indicating destroyed units and gaps in the line. He pinpoints the sectors where German tactics failed spectacularly. His mind races, artillery adjustments, anti-tank placements, reserve movements, but one fact is undeniable, the T-34 has forced a recalibration of the entire campaign. As darkness approaches, both sides pause briefly. The T-34s halt at the edge of German defenses, their silhouettes cutting sharp lines in the fading light. The Germans regroup, tense and silent. Every soldier knows the next day could decide the fate of the sector. Thompson whispers to his loader. They're not just tanks, they're warnings. Somewhere along the river, Guderian jots a note in his log. Underestimated Soviet industry, underestimated armor, underestimated resolve. This will not be repeated. Section 8. Reckoning with reality. Night falls over Mtsensk, and the battlefield is silent but tense. Fires smolder among wrecked Panzer IIIs and IVs, their blackened hulls gleaming faintly under the moonlight. Frost glistens across torn earth and shattered equipment, turning the devastation into a crystalline, almost surreal landscape. Every German soldier crouches in trenches or behind cover, listening, waiting. The engines of the T-34s have disappeared for the night, but their presence still looms like a shadow over every man. Thompson sits in his Panzer III, staring at the dim outline of the river ahead. He can feel the chill seeping into his bones, but it's not the cold that makes him shiver. It's the memory of the morning, the shells bouncing, the Panzer IVs crushed, the impossible resilience of the Soviet tanks. He closes his eyes and pictures the angular hulls cutting through the mist, relentless, patient, perfectly engineered. Somewhere behind him, a radio crackles. Guderian's voice, calm but grave, comes through. All units, tonight we evaluate. Tomorrow we adapt. The T-34 has shown its strength, but we must not falter. Understand the enemy, and survive. The words hang in the air. Understanding the T-34 is not just about tactics, it is a confrontation with a new reality of war. German doctrine, once unchallenged, now feels brittle. Officers and men alike know they have underestimated their enemy in ways that will echo far beyond Mtsensk. Thompson's loader, Kruger, breaks the silence. "Sir, do you think we can stop them?" Thompson doesn't answer immediately. He watches the shadows along the tree line, imagining the hum of engines returning at dawn. "We have to," he finally says. "Not because we are stronger, but because we cannot afford not to." Across the river, Guderian reviews reconnaissance reports by lantern light. Every note, every sketch, confirms the same pattern: T-34s dominate wherever they appear. German anti-tank guns, once feared, now look fragile. Infantry units that once held strongpoints are retreating in shock. Yet Guderian's mind is already working, pivoting strategies. He knows the answer lies in adaptation, in using terrain, artillery, and coordination to neutralize what cannot be beaten head-on. Meanwhile, on the front line, Thompson's crew prepares for the night. Tools are checked, shells counted, positions reinforced. Every man is acutely aware that the dawn will bring another encounter, another test of survival against the iron inevitability they faced today. The T-34 has not just challenged their firepower, it has broken their certainty. Thompson looks out across the frozen battlefield one last time before closing the hatch. The ruined tanks, the scorched earth, the silent river, they are all reminders of a truth that cannot be ignored. The Soviets are capable of more than the Germans had imagined, and this day at Mtsensk has been the proof. The night is long, every creak of metal, every distant animal cry, every whisper of the wind carries tension. Soldiers huddle together, sharing cigarettes, sharing words, sharing fear. And in that silence, one thought echoes for all: tomorrow, the T-34s will return. Section 9. Lessons etched in steel. Dawn breaks over Mtsensk. The fog lifts slowly, revealing the scars of the previous day: burned-out panzers, churned mud, and the silent hulks of abandoned supply trucks. The air is crisp, carrying the faint tang of smoke, frost, and something unspoken, the taste of realization. German troops emerge from their defensive positions, faces pale, eyes scanning for movement. Thompson's Panzer III grinds forward along the river line. His hands are stiff from cold and tension. He peers through the periscope and sees nothing yet, only the morning light glinting off broken trees and twisted metal. His crew moves silently, every man aware that today, strategy must replace instinct, and caution must replace confidence. Guderian, at his command post, studies his maps with a newfound clarity. Reports pour in from the front. T-34s have continued their advance in other sectors, testing every defensive measure. He leans over a sketch of the Mtsensk line, marking areas where German tactics failed spectacularly. Each mark, each note, tells the same story: the old methods no longer suffice. He turns to his staff. "We cannot attack them as we once did. We cannot rely on mobility alone. Every engagement must be deliberate, calculated. Our doctrine must evolve, or we will lose more than territory, we will lose momentum, morale, perhaps even this campaign." On the front, Thompson spots the first glimmers of movement in the distance. The T-34s are advancing again. But this time, there is a shift. The German line is no longer static or panicked. Engineers have reinforced positions, artillery has been pre-registered on likely avenues of approach, and anti-tank teams lie in wait, prepared to strike at the enemy's most vulnerable points. The Soviet tanks move with the same confidence as before, yet now, the Germans have learned to watch, anticipate, and adapt. Thompson fires his first round. It strikes true. Though the angle prevents a full penetration, it rattles the T-34's crew, a small but vital psychological victory. Another shot, from a hidden position, disables a track. Slowly, methodically, the tide begins to shift, not through brute force alone, but through intelligence, preparation, and adaptation. Guderian watches from the ridge. He feels a tension between awe and fear. The T-34 has proven its superiority in raw design and industrial power. Yet in witnessing his troops apply new tactics, he sees a glimmer of hope. Even the most formidable weapon can be countered with ingenuity and resolve. Back with Thompson, the morning engagement continues. The T-34s press forward, but the Germans are no longer paralyzed by disbelief. They maneuver, exploit terrain, and coordinate fire. Each destroyed T-34, each disabled KV-1, is a lesson etched in steel, tactics learned under fire that cannot be taught in classrooms. By mid-morning, a fragile balance emerges. The T-34s advance, but the German defensive line, battered but disciplined, holds in key sectors. Thompson wipes sweat and grime from his brow, staring at the advancing tanks with a mixture of respect and fear. He realizes something profound. This is not just a battle of tanks, it is a battle of adaptation, of mind against machine, of strategy against inevitability. For Guderian, for Thompson, for every soldier along the line, Mtsensk is more than a location on a map. It has become a crucible, a place where the German army has learned the cost of underestimating its enemy, and the imperative of evolving in the face of the impossible. And as the sun rises fully, glinting off T-34 turrets and frozen mud alike, one truth is clear: the war will never be the same again. The T-34 has arrived, and the world must reckon with it. Section 10. The Legacy of Mtsensk. Weeks later, the fields around Mtsensk are quiet, but the lessons echo far beyond the frozen mud and shattered panzers. Reports filter back to Berlin. The T-34 is not an isolated marvel, it is the spearhead of a vast Soviet industrial machine. Factories east of the front churn relentlessly, producing tanks faster than Germany can destroy them. Guderian reviews photographs and reports, finally admitting what he had long resisted: the Germans had gravely underestimated Soviet industry. Thompson sits in a command tent, inspecting a map marked with the grim paths of retreat and the locations of newly established defensive lines. His Panzer III has been repaired, its armor scarred, its engine still coughing from the ordeal. He can still see the T-34s moving through the fog in his mind's eye, their sloped armor, wide tracks, and relentless advance. The fear has not left, but it has been tempered by experience and adaptation. Guderian convenes a meeting with his top officers. "We have faced a weapon that defied expectation," he says, voice steady but heavy with the weight of truth. The T-34 is more than metal. It is a symbol of a new kind of war: industrial power, ingenuity, and resilience. We must learn from this, adapt, and strike back smarter, or we will be consumed. On the front, soldiers continue to engage T-34s, now with strategies learned under fire, firing at weaker side armor, exploiting terrain, coordinating multiple units for concentrated strikes. Each encounter carries the hard-earned lesson that strength alone is not enough. And yet, for all the tactical adjustments and cautious victories, the psychological impact of Mtsensk lingers. Thompson, walking among his men, can still feel the shadow of those steel monsters, the echo of engines that seem to carry inevitability with them. Every soldier knows that this day, this confrontation, has rewritten their understanding of armored warfare. For the T-34, Mtsensk was more than a battle. It was the moment it proclaimed itself a game-changer in the Eastern Front, forcing the Germans to reckon with a reality they had refused to imagine. And for Guderian, for Thompson, and for the men who faced it head-on, the lesson is unmissable: in war, underestimation can be fatal, and innovation backed by industry can redefine the battlefield overnight. As the sun sets over Mtsensk, glinting off frozen metal and distant tree lines, one fact remains: the T-34 is no longer just a tank. It is a turning point in history, a harbinger of the industrial and tactical revolution that will shape the Eastern Front, and the war itself, for years to come. End.